say when you wear Black Power Media gear, you can accomplish anything. You can play any and every position. From coaching, to kicking, to receiving, to running and juking. And, oh my goodness, I see that again in slow motion. Get off me. And you're going to have a lot of haters coming at you, but what you got to do is you got to shake them off, and get to your goal and accomplish it. And when that's done, it's a beautiful thing. I'm talking about going hard, extra, for that extra point. And when it's done beautifully, you talking about touchdown. Oh, and the crowd goes wild and they're celebrating with you and everything. Man, let's see that again. Nice.
Black Power Media, baby. That's how we do it.
Now go to blackpowermedia.org and get you some of that gear. Empower yourself today. Yeah.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. What's up, world? Welcome to a special edition of I Mix What I Like right here on Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball, always happy to be your host. Joined today by some of my favorite people, Professors Pancho McFarland, Chicago State University, Dr. Todd Stephen Burroughs. You all know who it is. Fellas, thank you for joining me. Pancho, for you especially, sort of pushing and leading and encouraging this to take place. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you both. Good to see you both. Welcome.
Thank you. Dr. Ball, before we start, I have to address a very important issue that was brought up in the chat. People in the chat were wondering, where was my hat, right? The hat that I wore before.
Oh, wow. What hat was this?
With the beanie, with the propeller on it. Like, people are wondering where this hat is. So let me explain the rule about the hat. Okay, chat. When we have grown-ups on, like Pancho McFarland and people we're about to have on, I can't wear the hat. They might be using this for political education purposes, right? We have major scholars on here now, right? Dr. Ball's reputation has increased dramatically. I can't embarrass him like that. So the hat has to go to the side unless it's just me and him having our fun, doing our hate. All right. So you will see the hat again. I just wanted to promise you that. All right. That's it. I just wanted to make that important clarification, and now we can move on.
All right. Well, so we've been sort of putting this together on the fly. Pancho, we were sort of set this up. I reached out to a number of other folks. Todd has been monitoring this issue from where his vantage point, and of course the overall issue is United States academia, higher education, universities, and sort of a national wave of everything from strikes to walkouts to a variety of other things, including testimonies in state houses, all kinds of stuff going on. And we have a number of other folks joining us as well. So let me just bring everybody up here. Josie, welcome. David, welcome. If you want to take a second and introduce yourselves, and then Pancho, I'll come to you and let you sort of get us started. But Josie,
I'm going to hand it over to David to go first. David.
Okay, sure. David, welcome. Good morning or good afternoon.
Hello. Good morning. It is afternoon, I suppose. My name is David Horan. I'm a representative of the Rutgers One Coalition, specifically the Newark campus. Is a coalition of students and community groups and the faculty union in an attempt to connect students in the community.
Right on. Thanks for joining us. Josie, anything you want to say?
Sure. Thank you for inviting me. Yeah. Huge fan of the show. So pleased to be here. Thank you to Dr. Burroughs. And David is actually heading up a podcast for Public Square Amplified soon from the student perspective in Newark. So happy to be here. I'm the founder of Public Square Amplified and the publisher. Hope I can make a contribution in some way. So thanks.
No, right on. Thank you very much for being here. So Pancho, you just sent me a clip of you supporting some striking protesters. Let's start with you know what? Maybe we should start this way, if you all don't mind. Let me pull something up here that I had just to give folks a little bit of an overview to maybe set some of the context for the national discussion here. This is just a summary that I got recently from the American Association of University Professors, just so folks have a little bit of an idea here. Average salaries for full-time faculty members, all ranks combined, increased 4.1%, the greatest one-year increase since 1991. This is the update of what has happened over the last year or so. But average salaries for full-time faculty members increased 4.5% among public institutions, 3.8% among private independent institutions, and 2.7% among religiously affiliated institutions. However, real average salaries for full-time faculty members decreased 2.4%, the third consecutive year that wage growth has fallen short of inflation. Average salaries for continuing full-time faculty members, those employed in fall 2021 and remaining employed in 2022, increased 4.8% in nominal terms, but decreased 1.7% in real terms after adjusting for inflation. In the prior academic year, 2021-22, average pay for adjunct faculty members to teach a standard 3-credit course section ranged from $2,839 in associate institutions without ranks to $4,969 in doctoral institutions. But, and I'll pull up another report in a moment, but part of the problem with that is that overall the amount of full-time faculty positions, tenured faculty positions, is decreasing nationally to greatly. So the amount of and the idea of people putting together careers and without healthcare and benefits, by the way, by adjuncting in various institutions or cobbling together, a bunch of courses here and there, is just not a solution. So anyway, just a little bit of an overview, because I know some people have this idea that everything is good in academia. We're all ivory tower scholars. We're all privileged and so on and so forth. And perhaps relatively, speaking, that could be said to be true, but I don't think that's the full sort of picture. So, all right. Sorry for all of that. Pancho, please go ahead and take over for a second.
No, that's important context, Jared, because I don't know those numbers. Like, I don't know the numbers, but I know how it feels. You know what I mean? I know how my colleagues feel. We don't know exactly what the percentages. I know at Chicago State, the numbers that you read, our numbers are lower. And this is we have a particular type of university, and that is predominantly Black institution. With a very high percentage of Black faculty, extremely diverse faculty, and we're getting even the shorter end of the stick of all of this, and I think it's pretty clear why we're the only predominantly Black institution in the state of Illinois, and we're the lowest paid faculty. So I mean that it's pretty clear to most of us what is going on there, but it is also clear that this is a national thing, obviously. And I'm just happy that we're finally getting into it, as not only at Chicago State as faculty members, but faculty in general. We're not the working class unionized people, typically. But now we're starting to get there, and it's a very exciting time. I think that the bosses, if they see the faculty rising up, I think they really need to be scared, right? Because in my experience, we are some of the least likely to sort of shake things up in many ways. I think, theoretically, ideologically, we're very good at shaking things up, but in terms of really getting to work and fighting with the bosses, we're not. And there's probably a lot of reasons for that. As you mentioned, we do better than a lot of people, relatively speaking. So, some of the downturns in the economy and all those kinds of things don't hit us as hard as maybe some of our brothers and sisters, and who don't have the cushy academic jobs, right, quote unquote. But so I'm just really excited that we're finally into this and fighting back. Chicago State is one of 4 Illinois universities gone out on strike this year. We're getting ready to be followed by a 5th probably this week. Northeastern Illinois is about to go on strike. So it is really, something is really happening here, and that's why I'm so excited to talk about it. So I'll stop there for now.
No, right on. Josie or David, do you want to start us off by talking about what's going on at Rutgers? And yeah. Sure.
Let me just do a little bit of intro and then really bring David in. So I'm incredibly, I moved to Newark a few years ago, joined up at Rutgers, and I've been both an adjunct and a grad student there. And it is really exciting to see the organizing that's going on on the Rutgers campus, across the state. We don't have a lot coming out of Camden, but certainly on the Newark campus, where we've been sort of in a lull of the great transformation of Newark, the relationship between Rutgers, Prudential, and the city of Newark. We've been going through this great transformation that have not, we're yet to see the benefits to the working class and students in Newark. And so it's exciting to see students like David and his colleagues, and there are several of them, engaged as undergrads, engaged in organizing. So I'm going to have David sort of give us a sense of how students rallied in engaging in this strike, and the things that are on the table for them and what they're still negotiating, and then we can come back in.
So the Rutgers One Coalition, the student groups, we were largely mobilized around bargaining for the common good demands. You mentioned Chicago State. I actually believe common good demands were pioneered by Chicago State. I might be wrong. I saw that one line in an article. I might be totally wrong about that, but when you mentioned Chicago State, that got the gears turning. So those demands include a rent freeze on all Rutgers property, especially in the city of New Brunswick. Rutgers is the single largest landlord in the city. A beloved community fund. So Rutgers has a budget of $5.1 billion. That is more than the GDP of some nations. Some of that money should be set aside for community members who need it. And debt relief. This is specifically internal debt, right? So if you have a financial hold, you can't get your transcripts, you can't register for classes, you can't do many things that are essential to being a student. That debt was to be relieved. Many of these demands did not get fully met. Indeed, the rent freeze got cut entirely, and the beloved community fund got switched to a state program. The community members this fund was supposed to be for, they received $40 million from the state previously. The state did not make good on this arrangement. That money never made it into community hands. The fact that this money went from a direct delivery from Rutgers to the community to this bizarre state-mediated thing, this is not the best arrangement. However, we did seem to win on the debt relief, and that will meaningfully improve the lives of many students. In terms of organizing itself, the energy of the Newark students is beyond compare. I meet students on the picket line one day, and then they're passing out flyers, buttons, and all the rest that same afternoon. The momentum and energy, especially in the law students, the law students just started putting together all sorts of forms, all sorts of documents. They had a whole system of ranking how pro-union your teachers are based on things they might say. Incredible energy, incredible momentum. We're going to keep that rolling. The strike may be tentatively over, but the fight has just begun.
Right on, right on. Dr. Burroughs, what you see happening? What's going on?
Well, we have more guests coming on, so I'm just going to drop a hate bomb, give some historical context, and as you get more guests, I'll go into the audience, which is my favorite part of being in Black Paramedia, is being in the audience. So let me drop my hate bomb. All right, let's talk about what's going on here. Now, New Jersey, a very wealthy state. Rutgers, Newark, and New Brunswick are in very wealthy counties. And so there's a lot of money involved here. And Rutgers is a huge employer of the state, employing thousands of people. So there's a lot at stake. And this is why I have to drop this hate bomb, because, you know, you would expect a guy who is a Black historian, who's done books on Black leaders, including labor leaders. You would assume, right? I mean, all these Black nationalists in the 1960s or whatever, when they thought about we're going to have these Black children and we're going to raise these Black children and we're going to have an army. We're going to have an army of Black historians. We have an army of people who are conscious and who are going to use that talent, use that ability to train Black people, and we're going to win. Right? This is that 69, you know, we're about to build the Blackest generation ever, right? So this dude, Holloway, President Holloway at Rutgers, you know, with that background, right? Yale professor, written all these books, right? You would think he would sit down and go, okay, now I can be a hero to both the working class and to my masters, right? I can do both because I understand both sides. So you think he would, if anybody, he would get everybody together in a room and say, we're going to work this out. I understand you. We're going to work this out. So what did he do instead? He went and first of all, he threatened everybody in an email. Yeah, David, I got you. He threatened everybody in an email. That look, I'm going straight to the courts, getting an injunction because it's illegal for you to strike in New Jersey. This is the tone he did. So when the Rutgers students was like, oh, really? Oh, faculty like, oh, really? We doing this? Okay, let's see, Holloway. Let's see what you got. When he did that, Holloway was getting ready to go do the injunction. So I hate to say this, Black Power Media audience, but in this particular case, we actually have a white savior. We have to thank, and it's so crazy to say this, we have to thank the white liberal governor for this deal. The white liberal governor told the Black president of Rutgers, don't send them out in the courts. Don't go to the courts on this. We can work this out. Governor Phil Murphy, we can work this out. Now, by the way, I want to mention that Phil Murphy is thinking about running for president if Biden doesn't run. I think it's very important to mention. And I think it's also important to mention that if Biden does run, Murphy is one of the people kind of like considered for a cabinet position. So this was an incredible opportunity, not for Holloway, because Holloway chose to go straight house Negro, right? Just straight up. There's not even an argument about it, right? It was a great opportunity for Murphy to come in and say, let me show my leadership skills, my negotiation skills. And he did that. And because he did that, and he closed the door and said, we're all going to work together, this is how we have what we have now. So it's very disappointing, Dr. Ball, and I know as an Africana scholar, you guys dealt with all these contradictions at Cornell when you were there in Africana Studies program. It's very difficult when we think about how the purpose of us studying ourselves and studying our history is to build a liberatory spirit, if not revolution, at least a liberatory spirit that would then be part of our work philosophy and work and purpose on this planet. But I've never made $700,000 a year. I've never made that, right? One thing I will say about Professor Holloway, and then I'll finish dropping the hate bomb, and then everybody can go back and give you real information. I've never been good at math, so I couldn't get good SAT scores, so I couldn't go to Ivy League college, right? So I always wanted to go to Ivy League college, couldn't do it, right? Thanks to YouTube University, I got the next best thing, because all these professors were putting out their whole classes online, right? Eric Foner, David Blight, and just for a lark, I said, well, let me try this guy's class, Jonathan Holloway. I listened to his class at Yale, his Black History class. Yes, Dr. Ball, I'll just say that any comparison between him and, let's say, the Biden Society is purely coincidental. Let's just say that for the Black Power Media audience. We have produced people who have become our enemies. We've produced people, and with help from them, we've produced people that know about our history, know about our struggle, and will still turn on us. And that's what we had in this particular case with Jonathan Holloway. He's the villain, and Murphy is the white savior hero, right? And if Josie and David want to disagree with me, that's fine. I want them to come in, and then when more activists come in, I'll leave. I'll quietly leave and let you guys have this discussion. But I'm very disturbed that this is where we are in our struggle, when we know we have enemies that want to destroy us and destroy our history and destroy our progress, so-called. This is the kind of Black people we produce, who go to court, who represent the House, and let the white liberal governor represent the field. Go ahead, Josie. I know you're ready to talk.
Yeah, it's my first time on a show, so I'm going to be gentle. And Dr. Ball said something several months ago. He was in a conversation, I think, with Doc Myers, and he said, hold up, with Howard, I'm trying to negotiate something. With Rutgers, right? To feed public square.
I don't think it worked, by the way.
What was that?
I was just going to say, I don't think it worked, by the way, but just go ahead.
It never works, right? Yeah, I know. It's not going to work here for me either. It hasn't worked for me with Rutgers. But I think there are a couple of things you're bringing up, Burroughs. One is we saw Holloway in his negotiations and his current negotiations with University Hospital, right? We saw the way he showed up for the community. We saw the way he showed up in addressing the Newark agreements in current negotiations on workers and unions and community healthcare, all of those things. Right? We saw the way he showed up in University Hospital. So the person who showed up in this particular instance is the exact same person. So that's sort of learning from your history. Like Newark has had a history with Holloway. Healthcare workers have had a history with Holloway. So it's not, it's just another step in the direction that he would have gone with University Hospital, right? And we don't know where that's going to end up still. The second piece is this, the attempt at this reconciliation that we have ongoing, which on the left we sort of struggle with, right? How do we engaging in coalition with moneyed white liberal class? Because it is not in the goodness of his being that Murphy's doing this, right? So I'm sure that he was pissed off when Holloway made that step, because it certainly creates unnecessary antagonism with, by the way, his Essex County power base, right? He gets to be governor because of Essex County. And he gets to be governor because of Essex County because of the Black people who showed up in large numbers. That gets him to the governorship. And we're not, and so how does this reflect on the overall Essex County, right? Because where do these campuses sort of sit? And we're not talking about Camden, but we've got Middlesex County, which is becoming a force in New Jersey, but still Essex County is sort of leveraging its power. So how are we reconciling as Black people participating in social justice movements, not for reconciliation, but rather for liberation? How are we reconciling that the partnerships that we're forming are with white moneyed political classes? Because the Black political managerial class has been sort of, and there were undergrads, right? And this is sort of the gutting of public education. And you go into undergrad, the gutting of undergraduate education. I've talked to David and other sort of undergrads. Pedagogy has to be reckoned with. Pedagogy curriculum must be reckoned with. What is being taught to undergrads across the Rutgers campus? I'd like you guys to take a look at it. So there are all of these pieces that you're bringing up, Burroughs. I think that the Rutgers strike is allowing us to wrestle with, right? This is New Jersey, would have continued to be a slave state if it could get away with it. This is Rutgers, and where when we talk about diversity, we only talk about it on an undergraduate level, right? So when we talk about diversity and inclusion, it's not at a graduate level. We should look at, and I've been trying to get those numbers, where those graduate students coming from. Many of them are from overseas. I mean, I'm an immigrant myself. Many of them are from overseas. When we look at the faculty and the tenured faculty, we've got to look at that breakdown. Then the other piece is on tenure, right? So if these negotiations are only for adjuncts and grad workers to seek a career to become a tenured, we're reinforcing, unless we deconstruct it, hierarchy of value and power and how you negotiate it. Because we know, right? Tenure professors want to teach, as I said to David earlier, right? They want to teach a seminar on David. They don't want to teach political sci 101. They don't want to teach labor studies 101, right? They're going to leave it to the adjuncts and the grad students who are going to take on the 5 classes, who run around the state of New Jersey. And I have examples of that, teaching 5 classes at different schools and trying to make a living and raise a family. And then when you bring them in as full-time and you negotiate some sort of space, they're sort of they can be reticent and can be afraid. And I'm gonna, I want us to sort of address all of those pieces, but I want to hand it over to David, because I want David to pick up on the fear and the intimidation that students are facing.
David, before you answer, so sorry to jump in, but I did want to highlight that and then I'm going to come back and ask both you and Pancho about this separately. But I had the excuse me, the privilege of being part of a group testifying on behalf of faculty and grad students here in Maryland for the right to collectively bargain, which we currently do not have. And one of the people testifying was a grad student who talked about, quite to the contrary of some popular opinion about the cushy life of the grad student, all the pressure and the stress that led him, in fact, to attempting suicide. So I don't know to what extent that resonates with what you're about to say, but I did want to highlight for our audience that in prefacing what you're about to say, that this is not just some whatever soft, empty issue. So, the condition of and treatment of graduate students in these universities. So I'm sorry, but please go ahead.
Actually, to that end, one grad told me that in their apartment they have, quote, the toilet next to the oven. Grads are paid just like barely above minimum wage. And in fact, in talking about the strike currently, one of the main things that was rejected was increased grad funding. They did increase it, but it's by pennies. It's by like 1%, right? The starting salary was, I believe, $32,000, and the increase right here, it was up to like 34,000, 35,000, absolute pennies on the dollar, right?
Yeah, I mean, the most you have here that for a graduate worker after their fourth year is a $40,000 a year salary. I mean, we're not talking about
precisely. Yeah. And when you're talking, the other thing that got rejected, I do want to push back on this notion that Governor Murphy saved the day, because one of the other things that got rejected was a campus equity pay raise, right? So that would have been 5% extra for Newark faculty, 10% extra for Camden faculty. There's not even, that just got roundly rejected. Again, I have to go back to the bargaining to the common good demand, same thing. Those got roundly rejected implicitly, though not explicitly, due to state pressure. The state said there's no precedent for such a thing. To that end, I'm very happy we mentioned the Newark agreements before. The Newark agreements, in fact, serve as a very good precedent for how a public institution such as Rutgers can be made to serve the community. In building of University Hospital, at that time, the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey, it provided for many special scholarships for Black and brown Newark students to get medical degrees. Some, not healthcare subsidies, but it was a pressure to provide for the surrounding community. And housing cost, rent subsidies for anyone displaced by the construction. These are all perfectly congruent with the BCG demands as they were put on the table. This notion that these demands are without precedent was simply insane. In fact, Rutgers now owns all of the institutions that were part of the Newark Accords originally. I think that when you're talking about the grads in particular, the grads are the most diverse teaching body among all the faculty, second only to the students, who are far and away the most diverse, at least on the Newark campus. It is, to me, absolutely heartbreaking that the demands for the students and for the grads are the ones that got cut. The full-time faculty is doing all right. Yeah, that's my train of thought. I hope I hit everything.
Yeah, sorry, right on, yeah.
Sorry, Dr. Ball.
No, and please call me Jared. But
yeah, Jared. So, I mean, I have these conversations with you when you're having your show, and I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? So I wanted to talk about, Todd's like, I told you not to bring her on. I want to talk, David, talk about, we have a young student who's a community reporter with Public Square on the New Brunswick campus, and she just covered the strike by interviewing undergrads who are on the strike line, and they were afraid for their pictures to be taken, for their full names to be given, because they're being intimidated. Their names are being leaked to groups that are going after them. We have a student who's covering this on the Newark campus, one of David's comrades, and she's concerned about her article because she's negotiating a 1 credit deal with Rutgers. So David, I want to talk to you about intimidation and fear, and this is 2023. This is we're evolving, but what is this reminiscent of? And I'm going to say, I'm going to let Todd sort of talk about what does fascism look like showing up on campuses. So David, why don't you talk about what students are afraid of? And by the way, the one from New Brunswick couldn't make it today because it's a big day for Ramadan. So go on, David.
So there's 2 types of intimidation. Those students more involved in the organizing. We in fact got doxxed. A photograph we took with Chris Smalls round up in a right-wing group chat. They had, circles around our faces that were tracking down our information. That was slightly horrifying. And the other type of intimidation was just general intimidation from the administration towards the student body. Both are unacceptable. That a public institution, you mentioned Holloway's letter before floating legal action. The wording of that letter was so vague that people students understandably, didn't know if they would be legally responsible, if there was some law or something that could be used against them. That any type of public institution, that President Holloway had the arrogance or comfort to release such an email. This is insane. You cannot threaten faculty, especially cannot threaten students. As the administrator of a public school, that is like the one thing you cannot do. And it was done. And no consequence was levied. The university's own Senate called for him to recant, and he didn't. The fact that to this day, no type of recant, no type of correction has been issued. Even now, students are like, can I support the strike? A bunch of student orgs up on the Newark campus were very concerned about openly supporting the strike because they didn't know if they would receive funding, things of this nature. So you have the right-wing intimidation towards like student organizers, and you have the administration's general intimidation towards students, faculty, everybody. Both of these things definitely damaged organizing, and both of which are completely unacceptable.
Wow. Pancho, let me bring you back in to say anything you like, but I want to preface it by making 2 quick points before I forget. One, I want to bring up this little data snapshot from just last month from the American Association of University Professors in a new report that I was trying to reference a few minutes ago. The U.S. academic workforce has shifted from mostly full-time tenured or tenure-track faculty to mostly contingent faculty, including full-time non-tenure track, full-time with no tenure system, and part-time faculty. Over 2/3, 68% of faculty members in the U.S. colleges and universities held contingent appointments in the fall of 2021. Contingent appointments, by the way, just mean anything that's not tenured or tenure track appointments. So adjunct lecturers, all of that is contingent appointments, meaning contingent upon somebody wanting to keep you there. Anyway, compared with only 47% in the fall of 1987. So that it has gone up almost 20%. In how many years that is since 1987 in terms of the amount of contingent appointments. Nearly half, or 48% of faculty members in U.S. colleges and universities were employed part-time in fall 2021, compared with only 33% in 1987. I did editorialize and add only in there if anybody wants to catch that, just so we're clear journalistically. About 24% of faculty members in U.S. colleges and universities held full-time tenured appointments in fall 2021, compared with about 39% in fall 1987. Most faculty members in U.S. colleges and universities held contingent appointments across all institutions in the fall of 2021. Women and underrepresented minority, URM, is this a new, this is new to me at least, acronym. Anyway, URM faculty members held part-time, women and URM faculty members held part-time appointments in greater proportions than men and non-URM faculty in fall 2021. Among full-time faculty members, women and URM faculty members held contingent appointments in greater proportions than men and non-URM faculty members in fall 2021. And lastly, the number of graduate student employees increased 44% from fall 2002 to fall 2021. compared with 19% increase among both full-time and part-time faculty. So in other words, more, just like everywhere else, there's just an increase in more dependent labor, less empowered and organized labor, et cetera, and so forth. And then one other thing, Pancho, before I come to you, is that this is something I thought was very interesting, and I just learned today in preparation for this show, that in 1980, there was a Supreme Court ruling, and this is certainly playing out in what's going on today. In 1980, there was a Supreme Court ruling in National Labor Relations Board versus Yeshiva University that ruled that tenure-line faculty at such institutions have responsibilities, making them managers and not employees. So I know this came up when we were here in Maryland testifying for collective bargaining rights, and there was this attitude that if you're a tenured faculty member, you are part of the management class, and therefore you don't need collective bargaining rights and shouldn't expect to have collective bargaining rights. And then, of course, they were ignoring all of that data that shows that there's fewer and fewer and fewer tenured and tenure track faculty, so more people who are left needing collective bargaining. Anyway, Pancho, I don't have a particular question. Anything that you would want to respond to or add, please? Well,
there's so much that y'all have been saying here that it just resonates, from the threats to the students to what you were just talking about, Jared, the contingency faculty. We've been seeing this move. We were talking about it in graduate school, and I was in graduate school last century, back in the 90s. And so we've been talking about it for 30 years and slowly seeing it happen. It happened so much in Chicago State. And to that point, too, our administration sent out letters to a number of universities, the community colleges, grad student organizations, et cetera, throughout Chicago, seeking our replacements for the semester. So they're going to pay people to finish out these last 4 weeks. They're asking, so that's one thing, is this, the scab letters going out, which seems, obviously unethical, immoral, everything else, right? But then again, the effect that it has on the students is just, it's crazy. It's crazy. There's who could fill in my shoes. I teach. It's not just me. I teach social class and stratification. I teach alternative economics. I teach indigenous thought and anarchism. There's nobody on my campus who can do that. There's nobody. I mean, who in the city can do that? And so they're gonna look at my syllabus, and they're gonna have any clue about what's going on. So that's one thing.
But I'm sorry to interrupt, but it doesn't matter if they're qualified to do it or not. They haven't built the rapport with the students. They haven't built the specific. I mean, it's not, it's not plug and play. Every semester is different. Every group of students is different. They have a different need. They have a different, you've developed that. So even if somebody happened to have that qualification or capability, it's not the same thing. You can't just put them in there like that.
Thank you for that.
Sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate it. No, that's good. I really didn't introduce myself, but I've been at Chicago State 18 years. Living on the south side of Chicago near the university. I just refused to live far from the university. At the same time, I wanted to live in the community where my university is located. And all my community work is in that community, the community of Roseland. I run community gardens and food justice organizations, and we feed people right there in that community. So that's my relationship, part of my relationship. I've been there 18 years. I worked hard. We've had some really horrific administrations that when I got there in 2005, there were 8,000 students approximately. Now we have approximately 2,000 students. And it's a lot of administrative misbehavior, a lot of giving jobs to friends. It's Chicago. They talk about the Chicago way, of politics. It is a predominantly Black institution, and it's predominantly Black from top to bottom. From the presidents to the administrators to the faculty, students, the people who work, food staff and all that. And at every level, these folks are getting screwed over, right? We are getting screwed over. So that's one thing. And I mentioned in the little clip that I sent you last week that I really feel like this is part of the worldwide global Black and Indigenous liberation movement. This is, we're training people here to think, to be, I like this. You guys are always talking about this on Black Power Media. Thought leaders. We're going to be the number one thought leaders, right? And, a lot of organizing gets done on here. This is a community university. It's supposed to
I got to do it right. I'm sorry. I can't.
The Coach's top thought leader.
I can't help it.
Yeah, we're training not that particular type of thought leader, but we're training leaders, right? And there was a lot of, when I got there in 2005, there was a lot of interaction between community activists and the university, and we're very dynamic university. I thought that's why I came there. I had another job offer. I came to Chicago State because of what I saw going on in 2005. So they're sending out scab letters. They're sending out lies and disinformation to the students, threats to the students. If you don't show up, you're going to fail, things like that. So it's been really, really rough. The temping of the faculty, the contingency faculty has been, again, on our campus, going up and up. And as our faculty is leaving, because we're not getting paid what they feel, other campuses are poaching our faculty because they see, some of us are desperate. So we're losing faculty who've been around for a long time, very good faculty. But the lines aren't getting replaced. So they're replacing them. Instead of hiring new faculty, they're replacing them with temps. And that you can imagine, it's just chaotic. It's just chaotic. And then that causes us to have to do more work as tenure track faculty, because now we got to be on all the committees. There's nobody to be on the committees, So this is what I've been experiencing for 18 years here. And at one point, about 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, I stepped out of the whole politics thing on campus because it was getting us nowhere. And I was frustrated with my colleagues, and I was upset, with everybody, and it was killing me. And then all of a sudden, a few weeks ago, a month ago, 2, they started talking about striking, and I was like, I got excited again. I was like, wow, really? The faculty at Chicago State is going to, and that's not to say anything bad about my colleagues, okay? Because I did at one point was very upset with my colleagues, but this is a place that, they run Chicago State like gangsters. They really do. This is, there's a group of people coming out of the Democratic Party, local Democratic Party, Rainbow Push Coalition, these kind of characters who have grabbed on to Chicago State and said it's ours and run it like, like a plantation, really. And I don't want to speak too much, and this is not my place to speak on it. And so I'm glad that Todd brought it up, because the president of our university and all the presidents since I've been there have been Black professionals who have a claim to some kind of radical civil rights things. Z. Scott's a lawyer. Wayne Watson before used to talk about all of his credentials as a civil rights pioneer of some sort. He's got pictures standing next to people, so I guess that's evidence. But so this is what they're doing. They're learning the lessons of the colonizer. And where's Faison's thing? The colonized covet the colonizer's house, or whatever, covets his wife because he wants to eat at his table and stuff like that. That's who's running the show around here for the most part. And then you got a lot of us, including the students, who are just shell shocked by this racist anti-Black society. Most of them are coming from Chicago, coming from the South Side of Chicago. And we talk about the South Side of Chicago, and you might hear about it in legend and songs and stuff, but it can be as rough as anywhere on the planet, I imagine. And so we're coming out of this with all the trauma, all of the fear, and then we see this shining beacon, Chicago State in the community, run by Black people. It feels like home, and then they get undercut at every level, and I think it's hard for people to understand what is happening to them sometimes, because we see that this is a Black-led institution, and it's a community institution, but we don't know what's going on behind it, and we don't, it's just, I don't want to.
We definitely get that at Morgan.
Yeah,
I know. I am intimately aware of that particular feeling. But joining the program now, and admittedly, this is somebody who should have been here a long time ago. So I'm gonna say it's Todd's fault, but it should have happened a long time ago. Lawrence Hamm of People Organization for Progress in Newark. Brother Lawrence, it's a pleasure to get to have you on the program and to meet you finally virtually in person. I know we've interacted indirectly here and there, but anyway, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us.
It's good to be here.
Let me let you join the conversation and give us your perspective from someone who has been, again, intimately engaged in grassroots politics in Newark for a long time. in a variety of ways. You're clearly aware of what's going on with Rutgers and all the other institutions in that area. What's your perspective on it, and where are you in Pop or anyone else in terms of this issue?
Well, People's Organization for Progress supported this strike, and our members walked the picket lines. And in fact, I was in Trenton yesterday for the big demonstration. And I want to say congratulations to all the organizers, the union organizers and the student organizers, and anybody else who was organizing on reaching an agreement. They have not formally ended the strike, but they have suspended it pending review of the agreement and the vote of the members. But we participated with the strikers at the Newark campus. Rutgers is a statewide university with campuses in Newark, New Brunswick, Piscataway, and Camden. I believe the Newark campus and the Camden campus are the smaller campuses, with the vast bulk of the student body being at the New Brunswick campus. I have ties to Rutgers over the years. Believe it or not, I was a student at Rutgers University at one time in 1972. My aunt Gladys Bowers worked as a counselor. This is my mother's sister, worked as a counselor at Rutgers University in the 70s and in the early 80s, I believe. And all three of my daughters are graduates of Rutgers University. One is a nurse, one is a television reporter, and one is a right now political consultant. And so I've had ties over the years to Rutgers University. Let me first commend the organizers. I can't speak for New Brunswick, but I was at Newark, and they did a great job. They transformed the Newark campus. I mean, the Newark campus, is the revolutionary. The Newark campus has a revolutionary legacy. But over the years, the revolutionary fervor that existed on the Newark campus began to decline. As a matter of fact, just yesterday, one of the administrators who was, I would say, part of the movement to involve students and to make students help get students to be politically active, Dean Creedle, passed away. I don't know, Todd, if you heard that Creedle passed away. I just got word that he passed away recently. But at one time, when the Newark campus was really just getting started, there was the Black Organization of Students, and they took over a building called Conklin Hall, and they held that building for a number of days. And out of the Conklin Hall seizure came many of the measures that resulted in the Newark campus becoming a diverse campus. But like all movements, they ebb and they flow. They flow and they ebb. And these recent years have been ebb years. Over the past several decades, the People's Organization for Progress had a very strong historical relationship with the Black Organization of Students. As a matter of fact, the Boss building, which, by the way, about maybe 10 years ago was torn down. One of the outcomes of the takeover of Conklin Hall was that the university gave the Black Organization of Students their own building. And our organization, in our early years in the 80s and 90s, we met on a weekly basis at the Boss building. So we had a strong relationship with Boss. But those ties, faded because, as you know, students are a transitory community. They in and they out, and you got to work to keep those ties strengthened and renew those ties with the other incoming students. But in recent years, that revolutionary legacy was not really present. But man, I'm telling you, the strike set that campus on fire. We saw picket lines and protests and teach-ins. And if you had told me, like, just 2 months ago that all of this was going to happen on the Newark campus, I would have, found it hard to believe, but I witnessed it with my own eyes. Now, there's some things I need to say. If you want me to stop now, I'll stop. But I do have a little critique I have to make. Okay.
Keep going.
All right. One of the things that's evident to me as a result of the strike is that POP and other grassroots community organizations based in Newark and the surrounding communities, we have to do more to strengthen our ties to the student body, and especially to the Black student organization. On several occasions at some of the rallies on the Newark campus, I called out to see if any of the leaders of the BOSS organization were there. And at the time that I was there, they were not there. And that doesn't mean that they didn't come through at another time. But I am saying that the numbers, the Black student presence in the protests, in the teach-ins, on the picket line could have been stronger. It wasn't absent. There were Black students on the lines, graduate and undergraduate. But I think being in the heart of Black Newark, it could have been stronger. And then the other thing is that the Black grassroots organizations, we have to do more to strengthen our ties to the labor movement. I do not think that we can build the kind of transformative movement we want to build without having a strong relationship with the labor movement. Just Friday, I was on 2 picket lines. Was Friday the day of the teach-in, David? That might have been early in the week.
I think
it might have been early in the week.
Thursday was a teach-in, but Friday we did have multiple pickets.
Right. I was on 2 picket lines. I was on a picket line with the folks at Rutgers in Newark, and I left that picket line to go join the picket line of Local 108, the retail workers in Morristown, New Jersey, who were protesting with the parking attendants. They have unionized the parking attendants that work for Morristown, and I walked the picket line with them. This is in line with POP's mission. But I think that overall there has been a gap. There has been a distance between the quote unquote civil rights, human rights organizations, grassroots organizations, and the labor movement. And it takes 2 to tango. It not only requires us to reach out to them, but they have to reach out to us too. POP has been fortunate because over the years, we've been able to build relationships with a number of the labor leaders and labor organizations in the area. I've walked picket lines with the Communication Workers of America when they were striking against Verizon. I've walked picket lines with AFSCME. I've walked picket lines with a number of unions. We've had a strong relationship with the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists in the North Jersey area. And our aims and purposes in our Constitution dictate that we do that. But I think we have to do more of that to get this movement going. But I think the strike went well. I think it will help the movement in general. And we'll see. I hope that the relationships that we built with the students around the strike, that those relationships will continue.
Hey, my apologies, everybody, but you just mentioned the Coalition of Black Trade Unions and AFSCME. You got Leonard Ball stories by any chance? No? Mm-mm. Okay. Mm-mm. That was my father. He was a co-founder of the CBTU and in AFSCME for a long time. I'm always looking to collect stories. So
right.
Just checking.
Right.
Does anybody want to jump in? Was there a particular issue? Todd, I know you wanted to come in and also give Brother Hamm a better introduction. Josie, go ahead. Go ahead.
Very, very quickly, I want to just mention a couple of resources. Anyone interested in talking and looking up the information about that BOS protest in 1969 can go online, particularly to a website called Rise Up Newark, which is done by Junius Williams, who's one of our elders. He was Ken Gibson's campaign manager.
Model Cities.
Right, Model Cities, right. And I mean, he literally, when the rebellions happened, he was literally under his desk, right? I mean, he's always been in the community. Junius Williams, he still exists. There's a podcast. He has this website called Rise Up North, but it's 2 cities right now that he has full details on in terms of the rebellions. One is Detroit and the other is Newark. So you can either go to Rise Up North or go to Rise Up Newark to get information on that Black student protest at Rutgers in 1969. I also wanted to say that we can't talk about Rutgers Newark without talking about Clement Alexander Price, who was a main Black scholar there who did a lot of public intellectual work. And he opened up Rutgers to the Black community. Pop and other events, Pop and other organizations would have major events at the Paul Robeson building for many years at Rutgers Newark. So I wanted to say that. The third thing I wanted to say is that Pop has a unique history because Larry Hamm and others were inspired by Amiri Baraka. Amiri Baraka had this poem called Meet Every Week, right? I forgot what the title of the poem was called. But
African Revolution.
Thank you. And he said, meet every week, right? And so Pop, and I'm not kidding, has met every week, unless Thanksgiving or Christmas falls on a Thursday. They've met every week since 1983.
That's about right.
That's amazing. Actually,
Amiri Baraka said in that poem, Black people all over the world meet once a week, and that's where the idea came from. You know, I mean, plus our material conditions. You know, how much can you actually do if you meet once a month? I mean, you could do a little something, but you know, to really have an impact,
it depends what the instructions are.
That's right. That too. That too. But you know, the other thing I wanted to say was thank you to the Rutgers. It's been a two-way street with Rutgers. You know, Pop, we marched on April 4th, which is the anniversary of Dr. King's assassination. And we did an all-night vigil. We did a sunset to sunrise vigil from April 4th to April 5th. And the students at Rutgers marched. I think they marched over from the Newark campus and they joined us at the Martin Luther King statue. Many of them stayed the night for the sit-in, you know. So I want to thank them for that and really helping to boost the young people's presence. You know, this is a challenge that's facing POP now, and it's facing other organizations. You know, our members are all up in age, and we have to do more to recruit young people if we want to see this organization last to go into the future.
Right on. Just very quickly in the chat, if you've prefaced something with an all caps question or directed it at BPM, I'm collecting the questions. I haven't missed anything. I'm not saying I don't think I've missed anything. I'm just saving it until we get to a more appropriate moment. That's all. Josie, did you want to jump in?
Oh, yes. Thank you so much. I want to say that I'm a proud member of People's Organization for Progress. And Chairman Hamm is absolutely correct, right? And Todd and everyone, right? We meet weekly. And it is, and I invite everyone to show up because they're public meetings. It's hard. It's tough. And we should give honor to Chairman Hamm, who keeps a consistent meeting. And it's hard. Sometimes these meetings go for 3-4 hours. And you know, he is at every level engaged in a certain amount of political education, which we know is critical. You know, for us as Public Square Amplified, you know, we're trying to connect with students and bring students in. You know, and this is Chairman Hamm. I've invited David and a few of the other students from the Newark organizing committee to come on to POP and sort of talk about the work that they're doing and also the ongoing work they're going to do through Public Square Amplified in podcasting and bringing a variety of issues that are happening in Newark, not just on education, but on housing. You know, that's their plan. There's a and yes, I know, just everyone should know that POP is really committed to developing deeper political education around unions and union organizing and why it matters. Last year, POP had a town hall on democracy, and I think there will be future town halls which will include union organizing. The piece that that I want to sort of bring into this conversation is the piece that I'm trying to sort of get more information on, and I've sort of talked to David about it. There's a population on campuses that they're called the maintenance staff, right? And so to the extent that they're being organized, to the extent that they're participating in these negotiations, because this is around, this is the hierarchy of value, right? This is about erasure. This is about how people show up. So we know that they're predominantly Black, and particularly on the Newark campus, they're predominantly Black, they're predominantly immigrant, they're Latino immigrants. What sort of the contracts that they have, what sort of benefits they're participating. I think that's something, I'm interested in working with POP on, both as a member and as Public Square Amplified. Where are they showing up in this process? Because often, and I'm speaking as an immigrant, often, when I came to this country, I had a funny accent and they wanted to put me into ESL classes. We continue, that actually happened. But I had a mother who sort of made things go the other direction. But that happens, right? Junius Williams, who was the architect of the Newark agreements, who's writing a piece for us on segregation in public education. And we want to do more on how immigrants show up. And so for this particular piece, is that where the maintenance staff in the contract negotiations, where the maintenance staff in the benefits? And I know that David has been, we've had these discussions, and he can sort of raise some concerns around what kind of benefits some people are getting and some people are not. And I think it relates to the maintenance staff, which I hope we'll do some more work on. David, you want to go ahead?
Yes. So all Rutgers employees are entitled to tuition remission. It tends to apply to your children as well. So the cost of tuition, that's the bulk of the cost, is just waived. You can get it forgiven, right? I know for the dining hall workers, and this is something that I think is truly criminal. The dining hall workers are contracted employees. They work for a different company, but they work in the Rutgers dining hall. What does this mean? Neither them nor the children they do not get tuition remission. In conversation with the dining hall staff, a lot of them live in Newark. A lot of them, some of them don't even drive. Some of them walk home, take the bus. That an institution that had, especially Rutgers Newark, continually prides itself on supposed equity. That some of the hardest working staff members do not get the ability to send them, either themselves or their children, to the school they work at. This is, to my mind, that is criminal. In regards to the maintenance workers, I do not have so many personal connections with them, but asking about it in conversation just a couple times, they do not seem to know that the tuition remission is a thing, right? The constellation of both of these things tells me that I know there's a problem with the dining hall staff. We do have to do some more research on the maintenance worker side.
I'm just going to throw this in here. I have no proof at all for what I'm about to say, but I know that my and other faculty and staff mistreatment, in my experience, has in part, I don't know to what percent, but at least in some part been negatively impacted by the fact that admin would be able on regular occasion to be able to walk past one of our offices and see a maintenance worker sitting and chilling and talking to us. And I know for a fact, though I can't prove it, I have no proof for it. I just know that helped with the marginalization and whatever. So thank you for that as well. Yeah, go ahead.
During the right before the shutdown, I frequently used the gym at Rutgers Newark. There were maintenance staff folks who didn't have access to masks, to equipment, right? And I had discussions with them about how are you doing your job and keeping yourself safe? Because of course they're predominantly female. How are you keeping yourself and your family safe? They didn't have access. They would have to purchase that, right? So when we talk about the material conditions of working class folks and students. We're speaking about the people who are making, and in Newark, they're not hitting median income. They're living at the margins of the poverty line. And they are. I mean, I live in what's called sort of the old landed gentry ward of Newark, but I take the bus with folks who live a sort of separate and erased life in Newark. I take the bus with them. That they're going to jobs that we see those, we see where they're showing up. They're living doubled up, tripled up in high rises. They endured a pandemic, and we don't see them across the news, right? We don't hear them talk. They're not being interviewed about how they managed to make it through. These are people who are being impacted by the digital divide. These are people who are working without benefits. So this is I'm going off on a larger conversation because it really concerns me when we talk about the material conditions of the working classes. They're very much a part of it. And the Black working class in Newark have become marginalized and become entrepreneurs. They're now freelance. Everyone's a freelancer in Newark. So these are, Rutgers, Newark's strike allows us to move beyond the campus because we interact, the campus life is part of larger society. So we interact with these people. So how deconstruct those levels of power and engage them?
I want to jump in here only because I do have to depart. That is the main project of the Rutgers One Coalition. It is quite literally to get students involved in the community, to try and benefit the community in any way we can, and moreover, to make Rutgers benefit the community, right? I'll add the caveat before, I can't prove it, but I know it is true. There are multiple dining hall workers who are working multiple jobs, up to 3 jobs, with an institution where the president is making $600,000 a year, where the football coach is making $4 million a year, that any person in this institution must work more than 1 job is patently unacceptable. It is criminal, in my opinion, right? We're trying to bridge that gap. We are trying to make student advocacy does not have to be limited to student issues. Students are in a unique position where they can advocate. They can support community initiatives and community initiatives to benefit everybody. That's the mission. That's the goal. That's the plan. And yes, I do have to leave like immediately.
David, I appreciate you got to go, but thank you for coming. I just want to say thank you for your work, and please add us to your list of supportive in Solidarity Media as you go forward. Appreciate you for coming.
Solidarity and good day.
Yeah, right on. Take care.
I just wanted to add to what Josie and David were saying, but just from a little different perspective. Like one of the things that the strike revealed at Rutgers was the very pyramidal, is that a word? Pyramid type structure.
It can be. Let's make it. Todd told me years ago, once you have a PhD, you have a right to make up words. And once you've been in the streets as long as Lawrence has, you get the right to make up words. So if it's not a word, make it up.
Yeah, well, it was a pyramidal structure. I couldn't believe, at the Newark campus, and I'm sure they probably replicated this strategy at all the campuses. They had a midday rally every day to bring the entire Rutgers community together, and they would have speakers, and the speakers were from the different unions that represent the staff and faculty, from the students, the undergrad and the grad students. And to hear the wages that these teaching assistants and graduate assistants were making, it was abominable. I mean, the money that some of these people, these are people with BAs, and some of them with more than 1 degree. And if you were to prorate it over a year, they were making the minimum wage. You didn't have to go to college to make that kind of money. They're making like maybe $15,000, $16,000 a year. Who can live off that? Who can pay rent off that? It's impossible. And it reveals how most, if not all, of these universities, are able to exist on a hidden labor force. See, they have a seen labor force and an unseen labor force. And the seen labor force are the professors. And we know what the professors are made. It was in the paper today. The average Rutgers professor is $161,000 a year. But the other staff that make the university run, the maintenance staff and the janitorial.
I'm sorry, time out. I'm sorry, time out.
I knew it was going to happen when you mentioned that figure.
I couldn't get to the mute button fast enough. I apologize for interrupting. Please say that number one more time.
Which one?
That average salary piece.
It's in today's Star Ledger. It's in today's ledger about the agreement of the strike. When you read down in there, the average Rutgers professor is like over $160,000 a year. The tenured professors. But the non-tenured staff, the graduate assistants, the teaching assistants, and the others, these people, some of them are making minimum wage. And I am not exaggerating.
My God.
And minimum wage. It's a wonder there wasn't a strike earlier. But remember, they've gone a year without a contract. So this pot was boiling and bound to explode. But, you know, there was an ironic moment during one of the midday rallies when they were having the rally and the people were speaking and everybody was sitting on the lawn listening. And right in front of us on the stairs of the Paul Robeson Campus Center, the maintenance workers were still working, removing hedges that apparently were dying. And I said to him, I didn't say anything during the rally. I said, there's a certain irony here, you know, that and they were all black. I mean, all black, not like even Hispanic, all black, digging up these bushes, putting them in these wheelbarrows and rolling them away. And the other thing I noticed is that maybe I'm being presumptuous in saying this, but in all the speakers that were speaking, I didn't see anybody that seemed to represent the unions that represent them. That is the non-professional staff, the maintenance and janitorial staff. And if they weren't included, they should have been included. And this is one of the things that has to be struggled against in the labor movement. I'm sure all the labor organizers know it, is the segmentation of labor in this country. The fact that management can, in fact, play off one segment of the workforce against the other. We see this with our work, you know, in the hospitals. Pop has been involved in a number of struggles all around the state to save hospitals, because this state has closed almost 30 hospitals in the last 15 or 20 years. And you see it, this divide between the doctors and the nurses and the not the RN, but what do they call the women, that the people that help the RNs, the LPNs? Is that what they call them? The LPNs and the other non-professional staff. And they will always use that against us. The other weakness is, I think that we have to demand at the grassroots level that more labor history be taught. Right. You know, I mean, what student knows the history of the labor movement? If I go back to my time in high school, we learned about Samuel Gompers and the Knights of Labor, and that was it. We didn't learn anything about the struggle for the 8-hour workday, you know, the creation of the modern industrial working class in the 20th century, and there you, the CIO. We learned nothing. What student knows? You know, when I graduated from, I didn't know there was a union. They were going to take union dues. What are the union dues? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Ironically, here's the irony of it. I learned more about unions at Princeton University, the bastion of the ruling class, than I did in the poor and working class public schools
it's a long running joke. You get more Marxism taught at the elite universities than you do in working class communities and in universities. You're going to get, if I hadn't grown up in a household that privileged the union movement and labor movement, I wouldn't have learned a damn thing. I was joking with one of my daughters not long ago. She was talking, because we don't let them work. Because I'm like, you're not going into the labor force. You don't have to. You're not going into the labor, or you're not just selling your labor for the sake of it. So you can just, whatever. And she was mad. And I was like, but you got to realize, if it wasn't for a labor movement, you would have had to been working since like 5 years old. You'd have been getting chopped up in a factory, so like appreciate, the fact that you don't have to, you know what I mean? And, anyway, but
I want to point out that I want to point out that we have not mentioned, and Pancho, I want you to hear me, because see, we're all going to be back here again in a couple months. Okay, Larry and
I hope sooner than that, because I actually would like to have more of these conversations more often. But go ahead.
You definitely, but I'm going to tell you why, Pancho. This is very important. We're all going to be back in a couple of months, because what we haven't discussed yet is we haven't discussed the merger of Montclair State and Bloomfield College. Now, Pancho, Bloomfield College is our Chicago State. They're being swallowed by Montclair State. And allegedly, all the professors at Bloomfield College have to apply for their jobs, and they're afraid that they're going to lose all their jobs. They're afraid it's just going to be purged, and that Montclair State is going to have a Bloomfield campus. Now, these are all working class Black and Latino students we're talking about. But we're about to have another major labor issue right now with those two colleges. So we might be back talking about this again in a couple of months, because we're a couple of months away from Montclair State deciding what it's going to do with and to Bloomfield College.
Yeah, no, that was something we've been talking about here for years, about somebody taking over Chicago State, because it's performing poorly. And, we need some professionals from the bigger universities to really show us how to do it. I hear you. I wanted to add a couple of things, Jared, if I might, and the rest of the panel, that I wanted to say that, all that you guys are talking about is things that I think are really important about this, in terms of reaching out to the community, being part of a larger community of struggle. Right? So that is going on, and the disrespect that we've been shown. So I wanted to say this. I am walking the picket line and participating in this every day, primarily not because I'm hurting personally. I make an okay salary. We do make less than all the other faculty in the state, but I'm able to be. I'm okay. I figured out how to live in this expensive city. I live in a small apartment, all those kinds of things. And as somebody who cares about our ecology, I don't shop a lot. I don't consume a lot. So I'm able to be all right. But you can't expect everybody else to do that. I can't expect my colleagues to ride their bicycle and, do these things, grow food like I do and all those kinds. I can't expect that. So I'm not doing it for myself in that way. The thing that I'm upset by, where I'm really getting something out of this personally, okay, is this disrespect and this attack on our dignity. The president of our university makes nearly $500,000. She's the second. We are I think we might be the smallest university. That's probably not, but the smallest state university. She makes more than all other presidents except for the president at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. And if you look at they've got 60,000 students there. We've got 2, right? So the amount of money that she is making, she's got a mansion that is right up the street from me. I'm about a mile from her mansion. We get to go play out there every now and again. She's got a car, a driver, So she got all of these things, and our students and the maintenance workers and the food people, all of those folks we've been working with over the years in different capacities. So it's the disrespect that really is upsetting. Now, of course, the money is nice, and it would help me and my family, absolutely. But it's really that disrespect and what's happening to my colleagues and their families, and then and some of our temporary workers and those kinds of things. And then another thing is that about the strike. You mentioned people coming closer together as a result, and and all that is the hope that we have too. And I've seen that a little bit. But one of the things that is going on in this strike is what I've understood, and now I get it. You don't really want us to strike, and not because we might win in that way necessarily, but because now we're becoming stronger. We see each other every day on the picket line. It was hot last week. I'm all sunburnt up and all this kind of. We're tired. We're working together. We're singing songs. We're fighting. We're getting excited. This is the first time I've talked to some of my faculty members in a number of years. As I mentioned before, I kind of stepped back from politics. So I wasn't on campus as much. I've met some people who've been on campus as long as I have or longer that I've never talked to. And now I'm talking to them. Now we're exchanging stories. Now we understand each other. Now we're going to fight for each other. So win or lose or whatever, we still win because we're coming together and people are showing what we can be made of. So I'm excited about that. And then the final thing I wanted to say is about, another thing about the strikes, and I've, heard this for years, is that when you fight and you go out and you protest or you strike or you do whatever, it clearly draws the lines. Right? This is one side and this is the other side.
Which side are you on?
Which side are you on? Which side are you on? And it becomes so clear. And you see, we've got a few people who are scabbing. And, and again, their families are in difficult situations, and I don't want to speak too ill of them, but we really got, and this is why we need that education that you're talking about, Chairman Hamm, about about the workers' movements, right? Because we don't know about solidarity. It's all about individualism and all that. Right? So the lines are clearly drawn, and there have already been a couple of cases, 2 days in a row, I feel, or maybe it was over a 3-day period. There were 2 cases of the police intervening. Now we're seeing the power of the state and people who are, they're friendly. They smile, they talk to you. Everybody knows my name. They've a lot of turnover in the police now. I don't know if everybody knows me now, but they used to, because they'd have to police all the protests and they'd always see me making noise and stuff. But they would always be very friendly, right? The president, we sat in the president's office on Friday. Wow. And she came out and told us there's a designated place to protest, and this ain't it, and then walked away. She scolded us, right, and spanked us a little bit. Then she went into her office, closed the door, had her big security people there, not letting us go in there or whatever. And then she went in there and called the police. So they came, campus police. They came to talk to us, and I got a big mouth, so I was challenging them on on some things. But it became very clear, like, the person who was smiling at me the day before now was saying, when we come back, this is going to end. It may be good or it may be bad. That's what she said. And I had to say, well, what do you mean by bad? What does bad mean? Are you willing to, I didn't say this, but are they willing to beat us? Or what is it? What are they talking about?
Yeah.
The people that were smiling at us the day before. Right? And so the lines are clearly drawn here. We know who is on what side. We see who is not in solidarity with us. Who is, again, I'm getting stronger ties with my faculty colleagues, and now some of us who are in our liberal phase of, the cops are might not be so bad, or maybe they're working class too. We have that argument of the cops working class. We see who they work for very clearly. We were doing nothing. It was a silent protest. We came in and sat in the antechamber of her office, which is a gallery. It's a beautiful gallery. And we sat quietly. They didn't even know we were there for the first 5 minutes. We had to go ring the bell to let people know that we were there. This is all true story. I know it's funny too, but it's true.
That's funny.
They didn't know we were there. So we had to alert them that we were there. Once they were alerted, then they got upset that we were disrupting the flow of business. Called in the Sergeant Sawyer, by the way.
That's the phrase. I love it.
And I said, well, how are we disrupting the flow of business? They didn't even know we were here. You can walk through. Only 4 people had shown up in the hour that we were there at first, right? So it clearly draws those lines. It connects us more to community, more to the broader working class struggle. Because again, I mentioned, like, I was so surprised that faculty at so many institutions are rising up, because we're not known for that. We're not typically reaching out in the way that other unions do. I know other unions are talking to each other, seeking support. Whenever there's a strike, they go out and they support each other. This was, faculty wasn't doing that necessarily. Some of us were. I don't want to disparage all of us. Some of us were, but now we're seeing that the power in that solidarity, and this is not going to end. You're right, and I really hope that we win. Not only for ourselves, but people are watching, and people are being inspired. We went out, and then 4 days later, Eastern went out, and then 3 days after that, GSU, Governor State University, went out, and then Northeastern Illinois is going to go out this week. And so they were inspired, and we're all inspiring each other, and the energy is really high. And the thing that needs to happen that I don't hear enough of in our, when we're sitting around together as a group, but we do as individuals, is the connections to the community, is the connections to the international workers movement, is the connections to Black liberation and Indigenous liberation. We're not making those connections yet, but we're working on it. And so this may be this one little small group. We only have 160 faculty at Chicago State. Maybe this small little group on the south side of Chicago, but it is something to be feared, I think, for those folks in the ivory towers and the suites and all that kind of. They should be afraid because of the example that we're setting. So I wanted to mention those kinds of things because those are the things I've been thinking about. So thanks.
Man, Pancho's a good dude, man. I know a little bit more about Pancho than has been shared here today, and I feel compelled to say that I really appreciate you, my man. I really appreciate you. Sorry, Lawrence. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, as ironic as it might sound, I was almost sorry that the strike settled as soon as it did, because it's in these protracted struggles that these indelible experiences are etched on people's brains and stay with them for the rest of their lives. Next month, I'm going to be at Princeton. Do you know that the 210 of us that sat in at Princeton University in 1978, do you know we've had an annual reunion for 45 years? Like, they won't let it go. I was one of the leaders of the movement, and I kind of, I don't talk about it a whole lot. But for some people, that was their revolutionary moment, I guess, for lack of another word. But I was almost saddened by the fact the strike was only 5 days. I mean, they settled. It was over in 5 days. But there was so much going on. I can't speak for the New Brunswick campus and the Camden, but at Newark, there was a lot going on. Do you know that on I think it was Thursday, there was a teach-in. The title, it wasn't the title I gave it. It was the title they gave it, How to Take Over the University. That was the title of the teach-in. And they brought in Vicki Donaldson, who was one of the original people in the takeover of Conklin Hall in 1969 to talk about that. And they brought me in to talk about the takeover at Princeton University in 1978. So these people definitely had the organizers of the strike definitely had the possibility of some type of takeover on their agenda. And that certainly would have caused a lot of activity on the campus. But, in these protracted struggles, you get a lot of political education, you get a lot of organizing experience. The longer the struggle, the more of that happens. But, it is what it is. You can't you can't go beyond the objective and subjective conditions, right?
Real, that's real. Look, a former friend once told me that you don't really know people, particularly in academia, until you work with them. And then I think you really get to know them, as you all have been laying out, when you engage in some sort of struggle. The lines become very clear and people become very overt even. I'm not doing that. I'm not going there. That's too much. You doing too much. I quit. And I do have a couple of points, speaking of that I want to bring up. I want to quickly just time check with everybody. We're on 90 minutes or so. If everybody's okay, there's a couple points I'd like to raise, and then there are a couple questions or comments that I'd like to bring in. But at any point that if any of you have to run, please let me know so I can at least let you jump in and give some concluding comments. But if that's cool, let me just throw out a couple of issues very quickly that I've been noting as we've been talking here. So one I wanted to ask, and I meant to ask before he left, but maybe others of you here will know, as it pertains to both Chicago and New Jersey, are you all in a similar position that we are in Maryland, where faculty can not unionize? Or are faculty able to unionize? And if not, are they working with other unions? And can you talk a little bit about the relationship between that in terms of collective bargaining status, and then also the relationship with existing unions in their efforts? I'm sorry, Pancho, I'll start with you. But in Illinois, can faculty collectively bargain?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can. And you know, one of the things that kept us from striking for so long is the myth that we couldn't. And that was being floated not only by the higher ups, but by us. It was, in the faculty, we're like, we can't go out. And we'd be in the union meetings and saying, well, we can't strike. We can't do this. It's not legal or whatever. And then the other thing was, that kept some of us would say, oh, it doesn't matter. We're going to do it anyway. And we don't know if that's true. It is not true. But the other thing that people would say was, we'll hurt the students. And that's the thing that keeps getting said over and over again. It's going to hurt the students. It's hurting the students. The security guard for the president and I, we've gotten a nice little conversation in which that was the first thing he said, was that it's hurting the student. You are hurting the students. And of course, then now I get upset. Now I'm at you. He said, you are hurting the students. I said, no, I'm not the one doing this. This could be ended very easily by the president and her team.
Now all of a sudden you care about the classroom experience and the student experience. Get the please, enough. I hate when they do that.
And then
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. The question about working with other unions, again, that hasn't been our strong point, but now I feel like that's going to be our strong point. We are going to be a lot of the union people. The CTU president, Stacey Davis Gates, came out and gave two really rousing speeches, and she was making all these points that we're trying to make. And again, speaking to a faculty, some workers who are relatively conservative in many ways, and helping draw those connections for us. And you would think we would know. We're smart people, right? You think we'd be able to make those connections, but there's a lot of wisdom out there in these working class struggles that we just don't have access to. And Stacey Davis Gates came, some other people came, and they were drawing these issues and helping us understand as faculty how important what we're doing is and how it's connected to the broader struggles. So anyway.
Right on. Thank you. Any of you about New Jersey? How is it there for faculty in collective bargaining and the relationship to other existing unions?
So I have been part of the adjunct faculty on the Rutgers Newark campus, and also in the CUNY system, teaching in the CUNY system as well. I don't know the answer to that question, Jared, but
I'm sorry, that's the City University of New York, for those who are not.
Oh, sorry, City University of New York.
Yeah,
I don't know. I just sent a text to a faculty member at Rutgers Newark, a tenured faculty member, to get that information. But I know that the decision to strike certainly rests with the union. I don't know about the collective bargaining piece. As soon as I find out, I'll share that with you.
Sure, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
No, I was again, and I had reached out to a group that I'm in an email with, group with from Maryland, to invite any of them on. None of them were able to on the short notice, so that we'll it's an open invitation, so we'll do this. But I was recently brought into this, and an issue, a point I wanted to raise that Pancho, you've raised, that really resonates with me is this recent decision of my own to sort of say, look, I got to step back from the campus fight politically. And it has really taken a toll that I'm not really proud of. I wish it hadn't taken a toll. I'm not thrilled to admit, privately or publicly, the toll that it has taken. But it has. And even I've told a couple people over the last couple semesters, they've invited me to a few things. I'm like, look, look. But when I got this invitation to join the broader, or to support in some way the broader Maryland statewide effort to challenge this policy against the legal status preventing unionization, which I only found out in my own struggle against the my university. I was like, what are my rights here? I was like, you all can't keep doing this. And it was only in a process and even communicating with attorneys that they told me, you don't have a right to unionize. You can't collectively bargain. So figure out another way. So when these folks, reached out, and then we're connected to the American Federation of Teachers, and I think one or another maybe might be involved. That has, but so in hearing and seeing all of what's happening nationally, I'm like, I get it, because God forbid we get this situation changed in Maryland. Day one, I know what I'm voting for. I know what I'm going to be arguing for. So it, anyway, Lawrence, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, well, obviously that in New Jersey, college faculty and staff can unionize and are well represented. But striking, I think, it might be against the law, because they were talking about filing an injunction against the current strike, but it never happened. I think we may be under Taft-Hartley for government workers, but that didn't keep them, whether they legally had the right or not.
Yeah, good for them then. Yeah, right on. Because I'm like, what's the point of a union if you can't strike?
That's right. And there comes a point when you have to confront unjust laws, right?
That too. Right. Both or whatever they say.
Right. Dr. King marched against injunctions against his march. He marched anyway. That's why the police were out there. People seem to think, oh, he got a permit. He filled out the application to march. No, they marched because they thought it was the right thing to do. And they marched against the court injunction at times. So these teachers struck. And I think it's indicative of the increased militancy that we're seeing amongst labor around the world. I don't think what's happened in France and in other places have been lost, on workers here in this country. The neoliberal policies that have come out of both Republican and Democratic administrations has in fact degraded the quality of life of working people in this country. And I mean, one of the reasons that the United States—
I think I heard a little shout out to internationalism.
Absolutely.
Is that a little just play. Go ahead.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we have to make note of is that after World War II, 49% of the American working class was unionized. In the 21st century, in 2023, only 11% of the working class in the United States is unionized. This is a setback. This is why—
Say that number again. World War II, it was what?
49% of labor in the United States was unionized. And the majority of unionized labor was in the private sector. Today, only a total of 11% of the working class is unionized. And now the majority of unionization is in the public sector. So we're not really unionized at a place that it really counts, and that's at the point of production. But that may have a lot to do with the fact that we don't produce much in this country anymore. The capital— I remember when I first went back to school to do the whole thing, because my college education was interrupted early on. When I went back in 1974, one of the first political pamphlets I read was on runaway shops. Before people were talking about globalization, they were talking about runaway shops. The fact that GM in Linden was going to close one of its plants and move it to South Africa, where they could pay the workers a fraction of what workers were being paid. So that led to what we know today as globalization. And we don't have half the— but look at what they're trying to burn down the country for in France. The fact that the capitalists want to increase the retirement age from 62 years to 64 years. Here, our politicians are talking about retirement being 70 years old. that's and that has to do with the fact that labor here is not organized. I remember about 4 or 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, I was invited to speak to the Bermuda Industrial Association. That's the main union on the island of Bermuda. They asked me to come and speak at their National Labor Day event. And I spoke, but they told me before I could come and get a speech, I had to read these books. They sent me about 5 books to read on the history of, and I always thought of Bermuda as just as a tourist place, They sent me 5 books on the history of the labor struggle in Bermuda. And what's interesting about Bermuda was that the Black struggle, the anti-colonial Black struggle, because they were under the British, and the labor movement were the same movement. And when I opened these books and I'm looking at the pictures, I couldn't tell if it was Bermuda or if it was South Africa, because the militancy and it was the same, but you would never know this, unless you actually had contact with these folks. I'm not really even clear how I got to be invited to speak there, but I'm glad it happened because it left a mark on my consciousness. We always knew that the working class was important, but it really became clear to me now that we had to do more to bring the activists together with the labor movement, the community activists, together with the labor movement.
Listen, I am a dog owner, animal lover, but in one of my favorite books about African rebellion in Bermuda, even the dog of the governor got to go too. Like everybody got to go. Anyway, a couple of questions or comments, if you all are cool with it. Let's see. I'm just going to go in order here as I was catching them. Question for the Rutgers folks. Is there any legitimacy to the criticisms of folks who claim union reps at Rutgers killed the strike despite the overwhelming demand to continue? And thanks, Tahir, again. Anybody want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I don't think we have that information. Whether or not we know that from listening to the organizers and negotiators. No, they're still. I mean, as Hamm said, and as the recent notices from the organizers themselves. I mean, they're considering the offer. So there's, to an extent, they're still in some form of negotiation. There's no work stoppage. I think people are going to go back to work. Classes are going to resume. There's no work stoppage, but they will continue, I think, to bargain. There are things that they didn't get. So we're not sure what's going to happen. So that's, I mean, I think that's a critical piece to continue to watch. There's some stuff that I wanted to sort of respond to some pieces that
Sure.
sort of the chairman raised about union organizing, and sort of going back to something we started talking about at the very beginning. Yes, you get labor studies and union studies at Ivy League universities because you're preparing them to be stewards of the economy and part of the professional managerial class. So they must understand oppositional theory. So that's critical, right? You don't get it in working class public universities, because in working class public universities, you are preparing them to be workers, and therefore not understanding rights as workers and not understanding the dignity of work. So that's a critical piece that we should continue to talk about, the role of public universities in the economic and social stratification of society. So that I hope we'll continue to talk about that and deconstruct it, because if we are to look at undergrad students and graduate students as part of a new wave of thinking around workers' demand for workers' rights and dignity of work and the role work plays, as opposed to the pursuit of a career, which is what we often talk about, right? So in the professional managerial class, it's about the career. And we understand that that is part of the way in which neoliberalism gets us to think about work. right? Work is a function of how you build society, and unions are part of the vibrancy of society. And so the different kinds of conversations we have to have around that. And I think it's critical for us to think of the role of public universities in becoming sort of the factory for the worker sector. The other piece is, if we're not sort of teaching, if we're not engaging in community conversations with workers on the outside of campuses, we're not sort of getting the rich education that Hamm talked about and that you mentioned, Paul, which is that there is vibrant union organizing going on in countries outside of America. There are, and not just in the northern industrial countries like France, but there's vibrant worker organizing. On my island, as an example, the teachers union and other unions have come together to sue. They sued the government of my island around some healthcare policies. One, the government, of course, is now appealing, and they're engaged in collective action against the government to go after the appeal. So there's a lot of union organizing and fights and struggles going on in the Caribbean, in different African countries. But at the same time, we know that post Ronald Reagan, and in the expansion of neoliberalism, and with the explosion in 2008 of what happened in the economy, we are seeing workers under immense threat. And the reason you don't see people speaking out on I mean, the retirement age in America could go to 80, is because we've been trained to think about work as career. Workers are petrified in the workplace. Workers are petrified to speak out about rights. We have many situations in different sectors where workers are being fired, and particularly in the pandemic era, workers are being fired. Workers are fighting back individually without sort of the support. Which I think, so to Hamm's point about how do we make visible these fights? How do we create this coalition between community civil rights, grassroots organizations, the press, even, for example, sort of local Black press, and workers? I think those are critical issues that I would like us to talk more about.
And real quickly, what island are you from? Sorry, I meant to get this one here. You mentioned your island. Then we have a question about what island that is.
Yeah. I'm from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Right on.
Very good. Anybody else on that, or
well, I just want to say I'm gonna have to jump off.
Okay.
Because I have some commitments I want to get by. There's an art exhibit, a children's art exhibit of art made by children from Gaza that's being exhibited at the Universalist Unitarian Church in Montclair. And it's over at 2:30, and I want to get there because one of our members, Dr. Matthew Johnson, played some part in helping to make this happen. The struggle in Palestine is something, again, I'm talking about the Black movement, the grassroots Black movement. You always have to keep in mind that there's a gap between what our leaders do and what's happening at their organizational level and what's happening with folks in the neighborhood, and we have to do more to make people aware of certain issues and the struggle of the Palestinian people. And there's been historical ties, between the Black liberation movement and the Palestinian struggle. So that's a discussion we could have one another time.
I look forward to it. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
And then the other thing, I don't know. I just feel the need to throw this out. It may seem a little disjointed, but I remember one of the revelatory moments for me in terms of my consciousness is and I think it's what Josie said that sparked this thought, is that the role that the university plays in capitalist society, you know, that we have this belief that somehow these ivory towers are outside of, you know, the social structure, when in fact, they reinforce the social structure. And in fact, they themselves, the colleges and universities, reflect the class structure of society. You know, there was a book, I graduated from Princeton. There was a book that was written about Princeton called The Closed Corporation. Now, if you went to Firestone Library, one of the largest libraries on the East Coast, to find this book, you might not find it. This book was kept in a special room. I'm not making this up. Kept in a special room of Firestone under lock and key. And you had to get permission to look at this book in that room. And it talked about Princeton's, you know, all of its ties to the major corporations and the richest families, and how that all worked together, you know, and that was one book. Then there was another book I read back then called Who Rules the University? And, you know, it's, we have to do more, I think, to raise class consciousness in this country. I mean, I think that one of the reasons we have these gaps is because we don't have a strong enough identity. And the irony is that 90% of Black people are working people, part of the working class. But, you know, this idea of that we are working, the working class is not, perhaps is not as strong as it should be. But I thank you for inviting me on.
Anytime, man. We're going to do this again, especially since my oldest wants to go to Princeton. So in the contradiction of contradictions, we're going to be calling for a Lawrence Hamm letter of recommendation.
No, you don't want a recommendation from me. She might not get in.
Mr. Hamm, one minute before you go, I just want to point out that I think we should both thank Dr. Ball for putting on his website 4 years ago a major excerpt of your forthcoming autobiography.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Hey, now it's my honor, man. I appreciate your work. Yeah.
The Faison case.
Which is an anniversary. That's right.
April 11th was the anniversary of Faison's murder. And we're trying to make some things happen even now around that. We don't consider that case closed. It is the only case I know of where murder was committed and a homicide investigation never took place. The officers that were convicted on civil rights violations and conspiracy, not on murder homicide charges. But brothers, thank you. Sister Josie.
Thank you.
Thank you. I love to listen to Josie talk. She's
right on.
Personally, I like that British accent. You know. All right, take care.
I like the content. Yeah. You talk about the style. I like the content as well.
All
but go ahead, Lawrence. I appreciate you. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Peace to Lawrence Hamm. And Todd, I do blame you for taking this long to get him here, but you know, we can work on that. And I'm going to now be putting in the link to that book excerpt that you were just talking about regarding Earl Faison. So that'll be in the show description, as already is a link to several pieces that I've had the pleasure of working with Pancho on that we haven't really had a chance to properly highlight or point out. So all of that is now in the show description to this show. So please folks, check that out at your convenience. Wait. Okay, wait, let me get back over here. A few more, there are a few more questions or comments here. Do our guests have any commentary on the criticism that leadership, particularly professors, unilaterally suspended the strike without a direct vote from the rank and file? I'm assuming this is the Rutgers case, Joshua. But do you all have any comments on this this point about faculty unilaterally suspending the strike without the rank and file?
Before you answer, actually, I'm going to have to go as well. So I just wanted to thank Dr. Ball for patiently allowing me to put together my little portion of this discussion. And thank you for allowing us to privilege Rutgers University and struggles in New Jersey around the world. So thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, Todd. I appreciate you and for reaching out to these guests too. I appreciate you. All right, take it easy, my man. Josie, did you have a comment on that?
Yeah. So this is, this is a whole bit about the role of tenure faculty in leveraging power, right? So they said that tenure faculty didn't want to leave the table until some concessions were made for others. But we looked at the concessions that were made, and a lot of them gutted sort of the dignity of the workers who are not sort of full-time workers, right? And other things. We see that in the paper that's produced. And this is a piece around, so what is the role of tenured faculty? And in the future, I mean, we're going to investigate it, but what's the role of tenured faculty in this whole process? It's the first time that Rutgers is striking. Tenured faculty, and a lot of tenured faculty sit on the board of governors. They make a lot of decisions on, hiring of chancellors and presidents. What role did they play in the negotiations? And for them to walk away from the table, because they still need the adjuncts and the grad students to teach the classes they don't want to teach. They still have to. They need them to show up next week. Many of them may be away on sabbatical. So they still need the worker pool to continue doing what they're doing, what they're meant to do. So, we'll have to, we'll see what the results look like. We'll speak to the organizers who are at the table. I'm trying to get, and hopefully, I'll share it with you as well, Jared, one of the lead organizers, one of the attorneys for organizing at the Newark campus in these negotiations. I'm hoping that we'll be able to speak to her, and I'm willing to sort of share her with you. But that's, we don't know. But certainly, I'm sure that it has a big role to play in it, particularly around the bargaining of the common goods, where it's just thrown out. So yeah, that's all my comment.
No, right on. Thank you. Let's see. I really only one more actual question that I think. Well, actually, two more. Let's see. Is the university treatment worse for students, adjunct, or staff? What papers, texts, talks describe the neoliberal horrors committed against each? I'm definitely deficient in any specific research on this other than what I see coming out from time to time in the Chronicle of Higher Education or the AAUP that we talked a little bit about earlier. But I would just say it's just like I think all oppression is in the colonialism sort of tailors its oppressive forces to the specific target. And that's sort of how I feel about this. But go ahead. Sorry, Pancho. Go ahead.
That's what I was just going to say. That's what I was going to say. That it's I don't know about worse. They do it differently to us than they do it to the students, vice versa. We like to say our working conditions are your learning conditions, right? So they're intimately connected. And then the question, worse is a
it's subjective.
It's not the most articulate.
And it's not articulate, right? Yeah.
Word. It does. I mean, what do you mean by worse exactly? Some of the pressures on the faculty are immense. That the students don't have to feel. We're advocating for them, for example, so they get cushioned by that. But then our students are not only working class, but they're working. The vast majority of our students are working, so they have different types of pressures than we do. So worse, I don't know. And if you're talking about worse in terms of maybe their intellectual development and things like that, that's a different question. And the university is, it's damaging to a lot of our students, and especially to our Black students and our Indigenous students. It's very damaging to them. So in that way, I guess I've already been scarred by that, and so now I can it's okay now for me to deal with, and I can fight back. But for the students, I think it's our identities are under attack. I mean, just all kinds of things happen at the university, and so
worse meaning
protections has the least protections. Thank you for that. Yeah. So in many ways, the university is not the place, but what else do we do? It's kind of like, where do we go now? So in protections, I don't know.
I mean, you could say tenured and tenured track faculty maybe have, but it's weird because I feel, I was trying to work this out, and maybe this is incorrect, but I was trying to think like, you know, it depends also on what stage of life you're in too. Like I feel way more vulnerable now in my 50s with 2 daughters and, you know, than I did as a young graduate student, for instance. You know, where I felt, you know, even at times where I knew I was going to be fired or removed, or I still felt, you know, physically capable, youthfully capable. I can overcome this. I feel a little more vulnerable these days, despite having nominally more protection.
Yeah.
So but so I guess, you know, but technically, no, you know, those without tenure are least protected. We already showed some of the numbers from the Rutgers data regarding the pay for graduate students, that is. They can't be said to be well protected. And if you're an untenured faculty member who, particularly if you desire a career in academia, you're really not protected. So yeah, anyway. Yeah.
Oh no, I mean, I've been an adjunct in 2 different public university systems, and you know, and you know, I felt, you know, it was easy for me because I had an economic support. I mean, when you pay someone $4,000 or $5,000 to teach one class, right, and you break that up into the units, right? So if you're teaching a class twice a week for an hour and a half, and then you have to prepare an hour and a half for each class, then you have to allocate, you know, office hours. And if you're teaching in a public university with students who come out of systems that have been gutted before they arrive at the door, you're spending even more time, because if you're engaged in liberation politics, then you're going to spend more time. You're not even fighting for a minimum wage at that point, unless you have your protections are somebody's paying your rent or your mortgage, or somebody's covering your health care. But if you're teaching 5 classes, and if you're an adjunct, you know, I was teaching 1 class, and you're teaching 1 class, but you're working full time, so you have protections there, you have benefits, right? But the protection on for people teaching 5 classes, 6 classes as adjuncts or grad students, and you're going to school full time, you're doing research, the idea of protection, or the word protection, is being deconstructed within a capitalist construct, because we're linking it to benefits, to whether or not you can speak out, to whether or not, you know, you can get another class. So you have to think about these terms when we use them. So we have to use them within that economic construct. So protections relate directly back to whether or not I'm going to have a job, whether I'm going to be paid. I mean, when I spoke out as an adjunct, I didn't get invited back, and I could go somewhere else and teach. But I was invested in engaging with young people because of the idea of liberation politics not being taught at public universities. So you make choices, and you still show up. But there are people with families who can't feed their families, and so I think these terms that we use, these ideas that we're discussing, we have to think about it within the confines of living in a capitalist marketplace, and that everything we do and how we think about who we are, which we're workers, we're products of the capitalist marketplace, how we engage in struggle. And so protection may not be a term that I would use, but rather, what are the justice rights I have as a worker, and how do I understand work?
No, hey, I appreciate that. Right on.
That's great.
One more, and then I'll invite some closing comments, and we can wrap up. But Blue Heron asks, is the solidarity seen across different levels of faculty at Rutgers also seen at other institutions that are protesting? I like that question. It seems like, what is the solidarity like? But, because there's a lot of strikes happening. We mentioned at the top of the show, there's in Illinois, we talked about earlier when my comrade Dylan Rodriguez was supporting strikes in California, or strikes, walk-offs, whatever they're called, whatever the specific label is in California. There's a lot going on. all over the place. But to what extent are they coordinated, and is there solidarity?
You know, as a POP member, I walked a picket line for the hospital workers, and covered the story as well. We had members from different unions across the state that showed up at the university hospital strike, at the St. Michael's hospital strike, to support the workers. Not large numbers. You see larger numbers, and when I say larger numbers, meaning one person will show up for a strike on behalf of their union, and when we march on particular days with POP, we'll see maybe 3 or 4 or 5 members show up, but showing up in force, masses of people, we don't see that a lot. But though many people have walked the picket line, many union members have walked the picket line, and many unions have shown up, but not sort of like hundreds and hundreds of workers are coming out. But there is solidarity and support.
Right on. Pancho, do you have any comments on solidarity or?
Yeah. It's amazing to see the solidarity here on all the different unions that are coming out. And again, it's 1 or 2 people, but that's they're working, they're doing their own thing sometime, but seeing those 1 or 2 is really energizing. And again, we're learning so much here. At least I know I am, and I'm pretty sure my colleagues are learning so much about working class struggle, about solidarity, working together. I think some of these questions about hierarchy and some of the things that some of us as PhD holders think about, our position relative to other workers and such. I think all that stuff is getting challenged, and that's the best outcome I can imagine of this thing. Regardless of the contract, what we get in the contract, the best outcome is that we are seeing ourselves now as part of the working class movement, workers' movements across the globe. I'm pretty sure that's happening.
Hey, I hope so. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Well, Josie, Pancho, I'm very much appreciative of for you joining us, Pancho, for you inspiring that this happened. Any last thoughts or comments for today? And then obviously I'm happy to host any more of these, going forward, as you all are available, have interest, or would like. I love this. But then, take a minute and say whatever you'd like to, please.
Well, I don't have much more to say. We always say that, and then we go on for like 5-6 minutes, right? But I really don't have much more to say. I think that I've learned so much listening to you guys, and what I said about they don't want us to strike. They really don't. When we start talking to each other and finding out our commonalities, and and that's not just with me and my colleagues. I'm talking about all of us. Organizing. You guys talk about it all the time on BPM. Join an organization. Just start working together on something, and it can be anything because there's so many damn problems out there, right? So join something, right? Organize, develop some skills, for this fight back, and for survival. Shit, we're getting into climate crisis, ecological crisis, and on top of an increase in this fascist anti-blackness, anti-indigeneity that's going on. So organize, develop some skills, and I'm doing my best to. I'm not just bloviating here. I'm doing my best to figure this stuff out, and and I hope that. And I think that's important too. Like to say that I don't know exactly. I'm learning. I'm figuring this stuff out. As as I'm sometimes dispirited and disheartened and all that kind of stuff, I'm still doing it. Okay, so I just want to leave that message with everybody too. Organize, build skills. Don't be discouraged. There's a lot of us out here. We just need to start recognizing each other. And thanks for everything. I learned so much, Josie. Thank you so much for your words.
And I didn't mean to suggest that when I was talking about either of us stepping back from campus politics, that it was quitting. It was just redirecting energy is really what I was talking about. Because and in my own, speaking for myself, it's just sometimes it's like, man, I can't. Yeah. How many L's can I just keep taking over here? You know what I mean? It's like you gotta Anyway, Josie, it was a pleasure meeting you. I appreciate you coming through. And anytime, I'd look forward to building again. But any final thoughts for today?
Sure. Honor to meet you, Pancho, and Jared. Thank you so much. I am not just a member of POP, but I'm also a subscriber to Black Power Media. And so to all of you out there listening, right, show up for Black Power Media. Grassroots organizing press is so critical to political education and to really creating social transformation. It is incredibly valuable. Read the Communist Manifesto, study capitalism, understand who you are as a citizen and as a worker. Capitalism has changed because it must change to adjust. And so I think it's particularly important. If you want to understand work, strike, the politics of the day, and how you show up, the 90% of us, I mean, it should be the 99% of us, but understand who you are as a worker and why work matters and why coalition building across hierarchies of work, why it matters in a collective way for us all to live in a vibrant society. So thank you so much. And oh, by the way, I support local news like Public Square Amplified. Peace.
No, thank you both very much. Yeah. Hey, listen, thanks to the both of you. Thanks to the remixers who showed up today and those who will see and hear this later. Thanks to the other guests who came through. Peace to all of you, only because we know you're willing to fight for it, like Fred Hampton used to say. Catch you next time here. I mix what I like it throughout BPM. Thanks again to the both of you. Peace, everybody. Catch you next time.
I mix what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.